First, there's an old anecdote. That anecdote about that old monk who'd been in the monastery for decades, seeking liberation. One day, when he was out circumambulating the hill that was nearby his monastery, his arms tucked in the sleeve of his robe, walking in contemplation, suddenly a voice, a booming voice, said, "Life is suffering." Tears came to the old monk's eyes. Had he not slept on the stone floor of the cell of his monastery through the long, cold winters for decades? Had his land not been visited by wars and famines? Yes, he knew life is suffering. But he looked around. Where was this voice coming from? When suddenly it boomed out again and said, "All beings must die." He nodded his head. Had he not seen death in many forms over the many years of his life? Yes, all beings must die. This he knew. And then, again looking around for the source of this voice, again it boomed out and said, "This is the law." Again the old monk nodded. Yes, death, ends are inevitable for all things. This is a truth. But he looked around again for the voice, and again it boomed out, and it said, "There is a state beyond this." The old monk thought, have I not been seeking this all of my life? Liberation. And again looking around, but where was this voice coming from? And then he looked up at the hill and began to climb. When he reached the top of the hill, he looked down, and there, beneath him, was a seemingly bottomless caldera. And again, the voice, now close, obviously arising from the depths of this seemingly bottomless abyss, said, "Leap, and this will be revealed to you." Had he not been seeking all his life? So without hesitation, he launched himself off the edge of this abyss. And as he fell, liberation was his. The second story, which enables a question to be asked, is about a man who had a trade as a weaver. He was a very accomplished weaver, and he wove perfection in every carpet, every mat, that was on his loom. He taught his sons to weave, and together they made a very prosperous life. They were known far and wide. His sons grew, married. But then, as the years went on, the old man became old. His wife died, and he was left feeling bereft, and very quickly went into senility and decrepitude from that time on. His family looked after him. The wives of his sons fed him and cared for him, but they complained bitterly to their husbands that he was becoming an embarrassment in town, that it was bad for their business. So the sons said, "Do with him what you will." Well, the wives were quite good-hearted, so they decided that they would build him a little hut deep in the eldest son's garden, where he would be away from the sight of the town. They would take care of him. So they built this little hut, and the old man was placed inside. He was lonely. They brought food to him, but he complained bitterly, time and again, speaking of his loneliness and having been disregarded by his family. One day, an illustrious sadhu came by the town and called into the shop of the eldest son. And of course, they were greatly honored to have a visitation from such a one, and they invited him to their house for dinner. After being feasted, he was invited to stay for the night. But he said, "I'm not used to sleeping in a soft bed." So they gave him a lantern and led him out into their beautiful garden where he could sleep under the stars. But when he went out and was making himself comfortable for the night, a querulous voice said, "Hello, who is that?" And the sadhu responded, "It's just a wandering mendicant." And with the lantern, the sadhu was able to detect the little hut hidden behind some jasmine bushes. And so he went to the door and was invited in by the old man. After some pleasantries, the old man told the sadhu of his fate. "I was the head of this household. I took care of my families. I taught my sons their trade so that they might become prosperous. And now I'm discarded like an old shoe." The sadhu spoke to the old man of several of the great truths of existence and said to him, "Did you not know that there is that which is called nirvana, that which is beyond life and existence? Would you be willing to undertake a practice that would bring you to this state?" Now, with a voice strong, the old man said, "Yes, I will do what you tell me to do." And so the sadhu gave him a practice. The next day he left, and from that day on, the old man undertook what the Sadguru had told him. His daughters-in-law brought food to him, as was usual, and they did notice that he no longer complained. There was not a word come out of his mouth. In fact, he had fallen into silence. But one day, the household had a great party to celebrate a sale that had been made. And late in the evening, the daughter-in-law of the eldest son realized that she had not brought food to the old man. He must be starving. So taking a plate of the food from the festivities, she went to the small hut, and when she opened the door, she reeled backwards in surprise, because there was her father-in-law sitting in an effulgence, a light that emanated from his body, and he was surrounded by celestial beings who were feeding him by their own hands. She staggered back to the house and said, "Come, come," to her husband and her others. The eldest son began to weep, thinking that his father was dying, but when they got back to the hut, there was the old man, no longer old, but sitting, illuminated in a light so great that they were blinded. The townspeople came. They fell on their knees in wonder and awe at what they were seeing. This old man, now vital, filled with life and light, began to teach what he had experienced. He lived for many, many years, bringing the teachings to those who came. He was given the name Tantipa, the Guru Weaver. The question that can be asked, because this story was not complete, what are those truths related to existence that arise for us when we recognize and accept that we have arrived? We are no longer a seeker, and life goes on, unfolding as life does. But now they meet, and those truths of existence become evident to us and can be expressed, even taught. What would you say from your own experience that the Sadguru said to the old man, what have arisen as these truths of existence. For you. Yes, we know all of life ends in death. Have we yet realized and embraced that all of life is suffering and that there is an end to suffering? What are these truths of existence?